Alright, not long till lunchtime. Who wants to hear a story? A cool fairy tale? Alright, this is the story of Little Red Butching Hook and the Three Little Pigs.
Well, that's not the way it goes.
Hey, come on. This is my story, not yours. Ears on, mouth off, and listen. You might learn something. Alright, the story starts, as all good stories do, with once upon a time. There was a butcher in a town, Mr. George Hook, and he'd been the butcher in the town for about 20 years. He had a daughter who was 16 years old, and her name was Varaminta, and she really hated her name. Since she was born, she'd spent a lot of time in the shop with her dad. She loved meat, all sorts of meat, and butchering, and everybody in the town knew her because she was usually in the shop. And she could do just about anything there, and often had red stains on her clothes and her hands and her arms and her face and all over her from all the cutting of the meat that she did. Everybody also knew she hated her name too. And one day, about 6 years before, one of the customers called her Little Red, and the name stuck. And nobody calls her anything else anymore, not even her dad.
Is this a made-up story?
Yeah, it's a fairy tale. Let me continue. Things were a bit tough in the town for a while because of the global financial crisis, and people weren't buying as much meat as they used to. And Little Red's dad couldn't afford to get as much in the shop either now. Once people started buying again, the butcher would have more money and could get more meat in so that people could keep buying more meat, and he could get more money and then get more meat, and, well, you can see what I mean.
Oh, get on with it, Mr. O'Brien.
Anyway, one day, Mr. Wolf, that's Mr. Jack Wolf, one of their regular customers, came in and was having a chat to Mr. Hook and Little Red. At the mention of the global financial crisis, Little Red put on a grumpy face because she knew it made her dad unhappy too. She tried to be like her dad because he was her hero. And now this is where it starts to get interesting. Jack Wolf lived a bit out of town near a forest, and recently a bunch of young pigs had moved into 3 houses they built on the property next door to his house, kind of half in the forest and half out of the forest. Mr. Wolf didn't have anything against pigs, but these pigs were young upstarts who partied a lot, made a lot of noise, and were often rude when he asked them to keep it down. Since the housing equality laws were passed down by the Supreme Court, pigs could now live in houses in any state, just like anyone else. It wasn't a popular decision. A lot of people believing that the country was being crazy, and pigs could still be used for food if they were fairly caught. Knowing that George Hook was struggling for a buck because of the financial crisis, Jack Wolf had an idea to tell him about the 3 pigs. Maybe George would get himself some free meat to sell in the shop. Jack would get his peace and quiet back, and maybe even some nice pork for a cut price as well. When Jack mentioned it, both Mr. Hook and Little Red's eyebrows raised, and Little Red got really excited and ran over to get her basket with all of her best knives and cutting tools in it, and ran out to her bike, telling her dad she would call him on her mobile phone when he could bring the truck to get the pigs. Mr. Wolf was amazed and surprised by Little Red's action, but Mr. Hook, he had a big grin on his face. He really was proud of his little girl.
Is this going to get scary?
Is she going to kill them?
Come on, be patient. You'll find out soon enough. Now, where were we? Little Red didn't have any trouble finding where the pigs were because she knew where Mr. Wolf lived. As well as that, while she was riding her bike down the road, and before she could even see Mr. Wolf's house, she could hear music playing as clear as if it was from a big rock concert. The music was loud, just like Mr. Wolf had said. But it was familiar too. Really familiar. Her dad loved classic rock and had a real affection for Creedence Clearwater Revival. He had all of their records, and some Friday nights, him and her mum would push the couch back in the lounge room and dance like there was no tomorrow. Her dad thought John Fogerty was a rock god, and the song she could hear playing right then as she was riding her bike down the road was George's favourite, a song called Proud Mary.
Huh? What's a Creedence Clearwater Revival?
Creedence Clearwater Revival. They were a famous band in the 60s and the 70s, and they were her dad's favourite. The song was one of their biggest hits. I'll try to find it later and play it for you. Now come on, lunchtime isn't far away. Let's try to finish the story. Okay, so... Oh yeah, Little Red was riding down the road and had a big smile on her face when she heard Proud Mary playing, as she loved the song too. When she got to the property, she saw what used to be a big empty paddock now had 3 houses built in the middle of it. They were next to each other with a couple of metres between them, but they all looked different. As she went through the gate and pushed her bike across the ground, she saw that the first house was smallish and looked like it was made of hay.
Straw!
Yeah, thanks, Betty. It was straw. The one next in line was a bit bigger and made of sticks. And the last one, almost exactly in the middle of the paddock, was 2 stories tall and made of bricks. This was where Proud Mary was coming out of. Little Red had no plan for what she was going to do to take the pigs out. Sorry guys, I'm on yard duty. Get your lunch and I'll see you back here after. Come on, out to lunch. If you behave later and get your work done, we might finish it off before home time.